First, I'd like to say thank you for taking time out of your day to come and speak with us. My name's AJ, and with me is Jesse, Sarah, Chris, and Matt, and we represent Sanofi. We are an international and publicly traded company located out of Paris, France, third largest pharmaceutical company in the entire world, and 87th largest company by revenue worldwide. Last year alone, we grossed $8.5 billion in profit. And the reason why we're able to accomplish such great profits is because of our corporate philosophy. It starts with people. What are their needs, and how can we provide a solution to their needs? One of the biggest growing markets right now is diabetes and obesity. It's an epidemic that's affecting both emerging and growing markets. And we are dedicated to providing solutions to this problem, but not just any solutions, innovative ones that keep us one step ahead of our competition. Solutions that are synergistic in nature, that work in concert with our existing drugs and drugs that we have in our pipeline. And we are dedicated to, and most importantly, dedicated to seizing value-enhancing opportunities. Now, there is an opportunity right in front of us, this growing market for obesity and diabetes. However, we have a problem. When people think of Sanofi, above and beyond Sanofi, they think of Big Pharma, or the makers of Allegra, Maalox, some of our flagship drugs like Lantus, but they don't think of us as the world leader in diabetes innovation and obesity management. We lack brand recognition, which is why we're speaking with you today. We believe that you will be able to help market us so we can position ourselves in these markets to maximize the potential of this opportunity that's presented in front of us. Throughout this presentation, we're going to talk about some of our philanthropic endeavors, showing that we're not just committed to making money, but providing healthcare and access to everyone worldwide. Some of the drugs that we have in our pipeline and currently that will help treat this disease, and the financial analysis of how our current drugs are competing in these markets.
Okay. Thank you. So if we look at our growth curves over the last year, we see that we started off 2013 a little rough, but we had a steady increase in growth over that year, both in the US market and in the European market. But by comparison, our sales were down. When we saw these numbers, we wondered, how is this possible? We're growing, how are we selling less? And you have to consider in this situation that the world market, we're truly a global company, and our world market is drastically changing. Which leads us to seeing that there's a big chunk of our sales going out into these non-US, non-Western European markets. We call it our emerging market. When you take a look at the real compared to the euro, it's actually come up 12.1% in 2013. So these emerging markets are gaining capital. And if we look at our sales demographic, the emerging markets are actually more than any of the other individual markets. The US being second, but these emerging markets, especially Latin America where that real is present, we see a 34.5% chunk of our sales. So here we stand to gain a lot if we establish ourselves in a market that doesn't yet have a brand. And that's another reason we're coming to you. We really want to establish with this kind of number. This is our flagship Lantus, and over the last 12 years, we've seen double-digit growth each year. And with culminating in 19.9% growth in 2013.
Through our marketing and sales of Lantus, we've developed relationships with hospitals, clinics, and physicians' offices worldwide. However, we have not been able to offer a complete suite of diabetes management tools to our customers. To address this, we recently negotiated a global licensing and marketing deal with the Mankind Corporation for their inhaled insulin product, Afrezza. The addition of Afrezza creates a synergistic growth platform and an opportunity for Sanofi to capture the growing obesity market through our diabetes product by dominating with Lantus and Afrezza. So both Lantus and Afrezza are human insulin analogs. And you might be wondering, how are they different? Why do you need both? So recall that management of diabetes is really management of blood glucose levels. And the goal of insulin therapy is to mimic the way that insulin is secreted in a healthy individual. So that requires both a long-acting insulin, such as Lantus, that retains sort of a basal level of insulin circulating in your bloodstream, as well as a rapid-acting insulin, such as Afrezza, which is needed during mealtime glucose spikes and other. So by adding these two together, we really do have a nice complement, because while each diabetic's trajectory is different, both type 1 and type 2 diabetics typically progress to require a combination of insulin therapy. Afrezza is also a significant improvement upon our competition's products. First and foremost, you can see that the yellow line showing the early insulin response in healthy individuals, Afrezza is much closer to that response than existing fast-acting insulins on the market. This means better blood glucose management and less complications from diabetes. Part of the reason for these improved pharmacokinetics is the novel delivery method. It's an inhaled insulin. But that inhaled delivery brings with it some other perks. Beyond the glucose control, the powder that's inhaled is less sensitive to temperature fluctuations than conventional injectable insulins. You can see it's a small and portable product. It's about the size of a whistle, and it's easy to take with you for meals on the go. Most crucially, this product addresses some of the psychosocial barriers to diabetes treatment, namely needle stigma. So especially for a newly diagnosed type 2 diabetic, or maybe a child diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, the thought of injecting insulin in public with your friends in social situations is kind of off-putting, right? So it doesn't matter if your doctor has prescribed to you the perfect plan of insulin therapy. If you don't have patient compliance, you don't have treatment. The ADA is now recommending insulin for newly diagnosed type 2s, and this is a market where we think we can really dominate. So this product addresses a need for improved blood glucose management, but it also innovates. And from this platform, we can fulfill our commitment to people and provide comprehensive solutions to diabetes, and let this sort of pairing of drugs serve as our gateway into the obesity market at large.
Oftentimes with diabetes, you end up with a coincident condition called hypercholesterolemia, which is it's a diagnosis of high cholesterol, specifically high bad cholesterol. And so we partnered with Regeneron to create a monoclonal antibody called alirocumab. This monoclonal antibody is currently it's 47 to 88% effective in all in different ethnic groups in reducing the risk of cardiac events. So there's a reduced risk of having a heart attack while you're taking this drug. Not only is it effective, but it's also 3 months into a 6-month priority FDA review in phase 3 trials. That puts us ahead of the game in comparison to our nearest competitor, who's also in phase 3 trials, Amgen. It puts us ahead of their drug, evolocumab, and represents a key step forward and step beyond the competition. We here at Sanofi are also looking at targeting global diseases in that our R&D department, Genzyme, is working to create a dengue fever vaccine. This is a map of, the countries that are affected by dengue fever. We've got Brazil in here, so the emerging market of Brazil and the real is fresh for this. But not only that, we've got countries already setting aside funding, like the Philippines, to implement our vaccine up in their national vaccination programs. This is a threat to 50% of the world's population, 50%. And that provides us with a several-year market advantage in that the next nearest vaccines for this are several years out in clinical trials. And between the dengue fever vaccine and alirocumab, we're targeting potent human diseases. And by targeting them, we're providing benefits to mankind.
So that's where I come in and start talking to you. And as Sanofi, we're more than just a company that creates great products to heal the world. We also are involved in actually being a part of the community and making sure that people are healthy as a whole. And in doing that, we have a very good dedication to people and philanthropic endeavors. And this is done mainly through our main foundation, which is Sanofi Aspire Foundation, and that's our global initiative. And it's mainly focused on third world countries, the countries that have the least access to good health care and the funds to get them. So the first thing that we're really interested in is controlling childhood cancer. We have a lot of programs set up to address this, and we are in partnership with a lot of good NGOs that kind of support this. The next one is in fighting maternal and child mortality rates, and this is primarily in the African continent, kind of giving a program to teach them about proper safety and all that. And then lastly, we're just, like I said, in there to provide medicines to people. So in doing this, we've provided a lot of vaccines and just donated a lot of our product to these people in an effort to do this. The last thing we're doing is we're responding to global crises or humanitarian needs. And so, like in Hurricane Sandy, we're there, in the Philippines, we're there. So all these times we kind of give to different charities and help them out. So that's that. We have another foundation that's just set up purely for North America, and this has a little bit of different objectives. And this objective is primarily in patient assistance programs. So this is even more, we're trying to get people healthy here in the U.S. and those people that can't afford it. So we do that with a lot of product donations and giving them some much needed health care. And then lastly, we have a good foundation. We help support the diabetes education camps. So this is kind of rolling back around to our main objectives of being #1 in diabetes management.
So we've demonstrated our commitment to diabetics worldwide, and with your help, we can establish ourselves as the leader in this market. The potential windfall for both of our firms would be enormous. Our agreement with Mankind leaves us with 65% of the profits from Afrezza sales. You can see here we're projecting around about $1 billion in sales for 2015, and that would leave us, assuming a pretty conservative margin, with $130 million in profits. And by working synergistically with Lantus, we'll stabilize our sales of Lantus even as it goes off patent in the coming year. Thank you very much for your attention, and at this time we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay. A couple things. And assuming everything I know about diabetes treatment I just learned in this presentation, it would seem to me that a challenge in the expansion you've talked about outside of North America and into the developing world, as you point out, a big deal in particularly diabetes treatment is compliance.
Right.
What you described was a little complex, multiple treatments, different times of day, different situations. What leads you to believe that compliance will be adequate in the developing world to be a good market for you?
It's a very good question. So, compliance has to do with, first, I think, financial access to the drugs you prescribe,
Sure.
right? And then it also has to do with lifestyle, and again, how predictable is your day? Can you really plan around it? I think that through our outreach, the programs that Matt spoke about, we can sort of set up communities that support these patients and, not like a group therapy, but something to that effect, right? Where we already have, in the US, I think, online forums and things like that where diabetics can discuss their treatment plans and sort of encourage one another to stick to the
And
plan.
where is the problem most prolific in the developing world, in the diabetes problem? What countries have the biggest issues, and where would we have to kind of position our branding to reach them?
Well, one of them is we have one set up in Mali. So that's one of the ones that's big because out of the U.S., U.S. is obviously probably #1, but Mali is one that we've already set up a program to help address this. And then like you were saying, in Latin American markets and some of the others.
That brings me into Brazil. It's one of the biggest rising nations on the planet.
Sure.
And establishing a brand there with the rising obesity epidemic is going to, target the countries that are having the biggest growth. So in the developing world, South America, it's Brazil. It's who we would like to target.
Sorry for interrupting. An important point of Brazil is that they have immense wealth in a small proportion of their population. Tons of poverty going around, which means the country as a whole has a lot of capital, a lot of tax money, but the individual people still need the care, still need the education, the government programs, those types of things that we can establish.
So probably an interesting branding question, I don't know if you've thought about this, but arriving in Brazil and say we're from France and we're here to help. I don't know that would go so well. So we got some issues of branding there, I think.
Thankfully, a lot of our amalgamations with other companies do come through other countries. We have a ton. In fact, here in Tucson, we have Sanofi Aventis that does a lot of R&D and stuff. So yes, the company is a French company, but we truly are global. And if marketing to a nation that is not so happy about France needs to kind of root through the U.S., I think that's doable.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
A couple thoughts for you. Could you spin back to the slides you were on the financial
Sure.
stuff?
I know we did kind of go through those quickly.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm a pretty good numbers guy, and I have no idea what you presented there. We went way faster than even a guy who's pretty experienced at looking at financial numbers could follow.
Okay.
And I would characterize your slides in general had that characteristic. There was my guess is a lot of cool stuff on these slides that said way more, stuff there. If you've got kind of just that slide and the next two are kind of rich financial information, but probably that alone would have been a 15-minute discussion, right?
That's a lot of.
So you probably would have needed to materially simplify that. There were some interesting points to be made that probably didn't need all that detail. You still could have made the points. And I would say in general, your slide had sort of the same thing, right? A lot of stuff. And I wasn't quite even able to follow exactly what you were focused on, because it was just kind of too much stuff. So when you package up slides, you want to think through how fast can the observer consume these, and what is the takeaway? What are in fact, I've seen slide design that I kind of like, that would take a slide like this and every slide, and you'd have a box at the bottom that has a quick phrase in it, that's sort of the takeaway, sales were down first 2 quarters of 13, and they are back in growth mode. That would have helped with the complexity of all this stuff, and kind of each of the complex slides. Yours could have been philanthropic organization contributed $300 million each year over the last 5 years to philanthropic efforts. And the slide got all kinds of stuff, but that would okay, I get that. So I say from the slide design, probably overly complex, although you might have been able to simplify it without too much trouble. The content was good, right? There's useful insight on every one of these slides, but probably not compatible with a 15-minute window. And the way that kind of forced you into the next thing I would suggest you think about is this at this level of brevity, this is kind of a conversation as opposed to a speech, if you will, right? It's kind of just a conversation, and that's in part why we're sitting down. It wasn't real conversational. You were kind of preaching to me, if you will.
Yeah.
As opposed to having a conversation. And part of that is just practice, right? And simplification,
Sure.
right? Conversations are kind of simple. speeches can be complex, but conversations are kind of simple. And so I'd say kind of think through the design of this, because in real life, you're going to do a lot of this. Right? You may do as much of this as you do of science if you're in a leadership position, is taking, and this is, I mean, your slides were kind of science-y, most of the rest were not. So, science is even harder to simplify down to a few slides, particularly when it's, in some cases, that one slide you had is, represented years worth of work, right? And kind of working to simplify that is not easy. And the other thing that was a little apparent, and this isn't the core of your course here, is learning how to communicate this stuff, but thinking about how to weave slightly cleaner together as a story. There were really 5 stories here, each of which was interesting, but at the end of the day, you kind of want one story that has 5 parts. And part of that is just practicing. I found when I do this, and multiple people involved in preparing stuff, it never feels like a story the first couple times through. It feels like we each set our part. And it just takes practice through, and getting used to sort of the conversational tone. And just being confident in your material. At the end of the day, typically you're presenting to people who know less than you do about what you're doing. So remember that you're the smart guy in the room, if you will, on whatever topic you're presenting typically. And if you're not, you got to get to be the smart guy in the room before you present. If that makes sense.
Yeah. One thing I'm kind of curious about in the context of our meeting, it's almost like we were kind of trying to pitch a sales pitch to you why you should partner with us.
Okay.
And coming off genuine, like we're having a conversation, and then from when working in sales, you almost do kind of have a script, and it's an art to kind of turn that script into conversation.
Yeah.
What's
My
like
experience with that is, if you're starting to feel like you're selling, you probably aren't. And if you feel like you're educating and informing,
Yes.
you're probably selling,
Yes.
right?
Absolutely.
Various components that you had more or less feel of educating and informing and versus selling. And almost always when I went into it, I did a lot of sales pitches I was in consulting for a long time, did lots of those. And whenever I felt like I was selling, I was pretty sure I wasn't. When I felt like we were having a kind of educational dialogue with one another, then I thought, okay, this is working. So you want to think about, how do I create something, and education doesn't imply I'm smart and you're not. It implies I'm informed and you're not, and we're going to get you to the same level of informed at the end of this dialogue that I am, and then we're both in a position to move forward in whatever direction we move forward in. So I always try to think of it as informing versus selling, because people love to be informed and they hate to be sold to.
Yeah.
Right? We all hate to be sold to. So I was in consulting for a long time, and I was with a guy one day who was always talking kind of down to people. And I said, look, you sound like a consultant. Everybody hates consultants, even me. And I said, you need to be in informing mode, not in preaching mode. And then once again, that sort of helps you get to conversational, right? Once you're kind of in informing. Some parts of this felt like informing, other parts didn't. And you ultimately have to get there to make an effective discussion, particularly if you go in the fields you're in. You're going to be in lots of situations where you're having to inform people of things that they may not be particularly well prepared to understand. That's the other art of complex stuff, is simplify without being insulting. That's a hard road to walk, is how do I simplify really complex stuff without sounding like I'm talking down or insulting. And you'll eventually get good at that. And the people who are the really good science people are good at it. If you're here, will you still be here spring semester? You'll be spring semester this year, you'll still be here. You know, the College of Science puts on these Wednesday night speaker series. Have you seen any of those, or do you know
I've
of it?
seen a couple.
Yeah,
My advisor's giving me
Those guys, go to watch those. Those guys who do that are exceptional at communicating to smart but uninformed people. Fairly complicated science stuff. They are really good at it. We'll go watch some of those, and I think they record them as well. But those guys are really on. Joaquin Ruiz is amazing at that. So I would watch some of those things, because that's a great example of kind of simplifying science without dumbing it down.
yeah.
If I could do a couple PSs to Rich's insightful comments. Firstly, yes, boatloads of great information. We do our best in this class to give you two contexts to present in. One is, as Rich is saying, more conversational around the table. Don't make your final presentation a sit around the table sort of tone. It's going to be full tilt boogie, formal presentation to potential investors, just so you don't conflate those. I wanted to congratulate you, and I think you, on it was apparent that you had forgotten a word or lost what you were going to say, and you recovered well. You really did. That happens to all of us. So bravo, really, good job there. Sarah, just so you know, for the final formal presentation, you won't be able to use any notes.
Okay.
Yeah, just so you know that. And Annette, it's humankind. Sorry, humankind, not mankind. And what was it? Oh, yeah.
It was a company, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh,
That's a
okay.
thing.
Yeah, but I think at one point you did reference mankind in general. Yeah. And lastly, for your slides, yeah, I would be more than happy to work with you on your slides to make the information retrievable, big enough to get, but not dumbing it down. So we could work on those. More than happy to do that. All right. See you tonight.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Good to meet you. All right, good luck to you guys. All right, good luck to
Thank
you.
you.
You're welcome. Yeah, good luck.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you, good to meet you.